Intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Aloha and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at .com. KarenPatrick, your host. This is Janet Kira Lesson with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we have a very special panel with special guests, GlennBogue, KarenPatrick, and KarenPatrick. We're going to cover a lot of subjects, but they're all about the Anunnaki and the connection to the Anunnaki and their history and the information and ideas that they are transferring down to humanity through the various groups such as A.R. Borden's Life Physics Group, the Linkage Institute, and we are also talking to researcher GlennBogue, who has been studying the Anunnaki and their connection and the clues that have been left behind in different art such as the statues of Moses with the Vatican with horns, the Arnold Feeney portrait, the Sistine Chapel, Pieta, Magdalene, Care and Girona, Virgin of the Rocks, Shepherd of Arcadia, yeah. And then we're going to talk about extension neurosensing, quantum price for the tell us what's about, and remote viewing, going astral, out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, the Anunnaki. I'm very interested in the Jesus, Mary, and the Anunnaki connection, and, of course, the sacred-sexuality, tantra, and tantric sex connection to the Anunnaki, spirituality, God, goddesses, source, and much more. So let me see one more thing here. Are these types of experiences, like going astral, remote viewing, extension neurosensing, lucid dreaming, are these types of experiences special people, or can anyone initiate this experience? So what might be the science behind these abilities? And what can we learn from working in this type and way of learning? What kind of techniques can we use? And are there any particular dangers or concerns we should have? Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring on our guests?
Well, I'm particularly interested in, I know Glenn's got some great things to teach us about the Anunnaki and about enlightened masters like Jesus, and the whole matrix of the distribution, sort of the distraction of who is on top, which of these Anunnaki is being apotheosized, regarded as a god, and what is God that moves all this, and just what does it mean to move into the spiritual dimension, and what does it mean in terms of our history? And Glenn has got some of the clues, and he's looked at it so deeply. I'm really delighted you're here and eager to hear what you got to say.
So let's bring on our panel members one at a time, and we'll start with Glenn, because Glenn's been away the longest, and he's returning after several month hiatus. And then we'll go to Karen, and then we'll go to Clay. And this first round here, if you could just take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a brief update of your research information and what you're bringing to the table today in today's discussion. Glenn, welcome back to the show.
It's always a pleasure, Janet. Dr. Lesson. For the audience, I'm always start out by saying I led a normal life in Toronto and in Philadelphia for the first 40 years. I'm a lawyer here in Toronto, and for the most part, a normal person. But I came across the Anunnaki work of Sitchin about 15 years ago, and it was really an eye-opener that he had made a major connection to the Bible and the fact that the Genesis story that's told in the Old Testament and the creation tale of Sumer match up beautifully. But I went on from there to begin to research the connection to the New Testament and exactly who Jesus Christ was. And I still think I'm the only scholar in the world who is claiming that Enki, the ancient astronaut that allegedly came here around 400,000 BC to look for gold here on this planet and to mine the gold, that he and Jesus Christ are in fact the same person and could be the same person because their planet takes 3,500 years to go around our sun in Sirius. And so the time from Jesus until now and the Jordan River until now was only about 7 months for the Anunnaki. So it made perfect sense. And when you begin to look, as we'll talk through the show, in the artwork that was in the Middle Ages and statues, etc., that are there in Europe, that were put there by the legacy of the Knights Templar from when they were executed in 1307, all that went underground and went up into the artwork. When we begin to see the artwork, I'm able to tie many major pieces of art together with this ancient knowledge. Back to you.
Well, I'm very curious about, you sent me some links, and I get them all up on the page, but I'm going to be through the show perhaps adding that, or after the show, the different pieces of art. But I was looking at them, and I know you're going to give us some interesting correlation between the different artists and the information that they have brought forth from history, these clues and cues to us about the Anunnaki and their interactions throughout the time. I too agree with you about the Jesus connection. Jesus is Enki, and Mary Magdalene is Ninmah. And I'm looking at the research and the evidence. So I can't prove it 100%, but for me, that ties in very succinctly, and I agree. But we'll come back to that. And next, we're going to bring on KarenPatrick. Are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm really glad to be here. My name is KarenPatrick. I have been very privileged to work with Janet and Sasha for a couple of months now, helping with some co-hosting of shows and bringing on some guests and working behind the scenes. Very wonderful organization is theirs, and I appreciate that. I'm also an independent researcher, an author, and a contactee. And the contactee part starts first for me. I've identified I've been a contactee pretty much most of my life, but it became very earnestly on in 2009 when I began to explore some of my experiences using automatic writing, and I was able to make telepathic contact with one of my Anunnaki ancestors, amongst other ancestors. I'm Native American, so that as well. And I've also been an independent researcher, very interested in alternative history, and also I've been with my partner, Brett Collin Shepard. We've been working on lunar anomalies, Earth anomalies, and Mars anomalies research. And we've authored a book together. We're working on some more books. I'm able to edit some books in the field. And my basic, this is a big puzzle. It's humanity's puzzle. And it's our personal puzzle. Because if you're listening, you're probably a person who really wants to know who you are. And it's really hard to identify who we are if we don't know where we came from. And I begin to believe that so many have, that Zechariah Sitchin was onto something when he was talking about what the Sumerians were saying. And I think what I see most clearly is there seems to be kind of two tracks for humanity. One is the very pyramidic, control matrix kind of construct some people seem to be very happy to be in. And there's also what I call free-range humans. Those of us who are independent-minded and self-directed, and we sort of would like to be left alone. Thank you very much. And I learning the story of Enki and Enlil and all of these stories, it really helps me understand what I view when I view humanity on this planet I believe we have extraterrestrial origins. And our history is showing that, and the Internet was a gift given to us by our space friends to present information in a way that it begins to spread and grow. And a lot of the researchers enjoying the Internet as a way to look up so many things that were unavailable years ago when I first started looking at this. So glad to come on board. I've got wonderful things to say about Airborne and the organization as I know it. And back to you.
Okay, and our next panel member is Quanta Price. Welcome back to the show, and your turn.
Hi. Well, I was never really prone to a lot of ET type of research or anything. I was just really curious about human capabilities and human potential. And that's when I got in touch with Life Physics Group and A.R. Borden and Karen and a whole slew of other really weird people that I seem to have a lot in common with. But my personal, I guess you could say, specialty was the life applications of a lot of the exercises that A.R. Borden and Life Physics Group conducted in their control studies. So I had a lot of experience in the meditation aspect and the experimentations with, some of the terms that they would use, manifest production observership and synchronicity induction, and also sensitizing the central nervous systems and that couple with the aura, or the Meissner, anti-Meissner field, is just a technical term for your aura, and learning how to discern and disseminate the information that you receive from your own core self, and then also from your environment, your non-local environment. So I have had interfacing or contactee communications and experiences, and it's very real, and it's also kind of something that's so easy to do that it's actually it's almost like making a cell phone call, and I'm sure Karen could speak more to this than I could, because I haven't done it very often, but I have had communications where you're literally just exchanging information, and a lot of times that information is not it's not cortical in a sense that you can have a conversation. It's many times it's emotional, and it's kind of sensation-based communication, but it's very real. But I really don't know where to go with that, but I'm familiar with a lot of the technical aspects of Life Physics Group, and also I'm really familiar with the experiential aspects of it. I've applied them in a lot of different scenarios, so that's kind of my niche.
Thank you. Josh, you want to say something?
Yeah, I really can identify with what you're saying, Clay, especially Borden's topological thinking. It's very much like what we work at in psychology, what we call centering, and allowing yourself to realize any center you have is only in one of many possible dimensions, and so it goes on in the very same way that Borden talks about being able to be in more than one place-time at the same time, and I really like that. It does tie in to what we're going to be looking at today, too, and I'm, of course, really interested in all this stuff and how this ties in with the Anunnaki and the whole model they gave us and impressed on us about we have to be in opposition with one another and how we can get beyond that.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Back to the Anunnaki. Go ahead, continue to Dr. Leslie.
Oh no, I just a lot of the lack of clarity comes through trauma. That's my personal experience.
Yeah.
So Anunnaki, when you meditate, you absorb charge into your cells. They absorb charge, and where there's energy, there's information. So my understanding is that Anunnaki have a very high cellular capacitance. They can absorb a lot of charge into their cells because they're kind of by nature. It's something that they're able to do. So they're also able to extract much larger amounts of information and send out much larger amounts of information because their bodies are attuned to that process. We also have the same capability, but trauma, bad diet, and basically having it trained out of your system is what creates a more myopic reality experience.
They eat gold and platinum too. They do things that enhance what they've already got.
Right. That's my understanding as well. And we have an emotional capacity that is higher in a spectrum level. In a lot of ways, you could see that as more potential power to change our environment than they have.
Yes, that's what we offer to them. That's why we don't have to be a secondary species. We have wonderful gifts just like they do.
Exactly. That's my personal experience is that we have, like, from an emotional standpoint and auric or physiological standpoint, we are literally sitting in a jet engine. And it's a little rusty. And so when you do a lot of meditation and you do a lot of self-work, like you emotionally process triggers, you absorb more chi, and you quit bleeding it off. And that's where a lot of these entities, for lack of a better term, they suck charge off of you. They can feed off of you. So the more self-work you do in meditation, you increase the cellular capacitance over a period of time, and that's what actually begins to create a more coherent local resonance. So you start to change your local environment in different ways by doing that. A life physics group calls it manifest production observership. It's just your intentions become more cohered, and you start to allow these synchronistic events and manifestations to kind of accelerate into your local environment.
Oh.
That makes sense.
Who are you, Janet?
Oh, I don't know. I was always trying to ask you that question. But I've done a lot of therapy on myself because I certainly was lost. I had a very abusive childhood, and when I did therapy, I started getting more and more clarity. I certainly have not arrived to where I'm yet to go, but I agree that there's probably keeping me down and lower awareness that the trauma was creating my reality, and I was reinforcing it every time I got traumatized. So when I met Dr. Lesson, we delved into it, and that's what helped me gain clarity over time, and I'm still working on it. That's why I'm here doing this research, doing these shows, and having these incredible people like this panel that's gathered here today, so we can look at it and connect the dots and perhaps create a better reality for everybody, because the one that we have right now pretty much sucks, and we have a power elite, the ruling forces that keep us impoverished in struggle and fear. Although I won't go there, haha. So I want to go back to Glenn for a moment. We're going to go round robin here, and I don't want to time it. If you have something that you want to say, we'll get around to you. So you can either address what the previous person said, or introduce your own information, or a combination of whatever comes to mind. And Glenn, I really am super excited about what you're bringing to the table today. So let's hear a little bit more about your research, since you've been away for so long.
Well, I want to keep going with the theme, first of all, about the shock that the panelist was just talking about. And it really fits in well with what Elle has done. I have just received a CD set from Barbara Marciniak's work. I didn't know her work till about 2 months ago. She, of course, channels the Pleiadians. And what's coming out of her tape she couldn't be making it up, because she's confirming 4 different aspects of my work that has been channeled through, as I said, from the Pleiadians. And so what Al has done to keep the secret of what our hybrid nature is capable of, and we are sitting in a jet engine, where particularly the females, I've said in the show before, the human female is the most advanced machine in the known universe. They just don't have the instructions how to operate the thing yet. But as that knowledge began to come out, of course, Al was terrific at shock doctrine. And from the time of the Council of Nicaea, I'm a Catholic, and I went after the Catholic Church when they would not do anything to protect my children from the divorce I was going through. And that's when was the trigger for me personally to get delving in there amid the pedophile scandal to find out what else was being done at the Vatican. And from the Council of Nicaea, where they fashioned the Catholic Church, and up to the time of Pope Gregory in the 6th century, when he lambasted the Magdalene as a prostitute for marrying Jesus at the wedding at Cana. And when I looked at the wedding at Cana, you see a very famous wedding there, because the original name of Jerusalem was Ariel. And Ariel meant that she'll come there dressed as a bride. And that took me back through Egypt into Sumer and the Sicilian story that Enki always wanted to marry Ninmah. And that's where we tie the Black Madonna to Isis in Egypt and to the Magdalene. They're the same person. And Jesus, this whole time, Enki has been preparing Jerusalem for this wedding. Of course, El also wants to marry Ninmah under their rules. They have the one child together out of wedlock. That's why she's the Black Madonna. But when she decides to leave El and go and marry Enki at the wedding at Cana, then she's lambasted. And from that point forward, El has done everything he can do to traumatize the world. The Knights Templar, of course, found a secret lineage in around Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They were guided there by Hildegard de Bingen, told where to dig, the 9 knights where to dig, what to find. And that genealogy was taken into the Languedoc, is my understanding. The Cathars had it, and then left from there when they were exterminated by the Vatican in 1244. It went down and was buried at Rennes-le-Château in France for 600 years. But in the period from 1800 on, those scrolls predict that the female will begin to make apparitions all over the world. And this is where Barbara Marciniak comes in with the 22 key apparitions of this woman, who the Vatican is saying is Virgin Mary, mother of Jesus, born with no sperm. But Marciniak is asking the question, well, there's just a woman. Who exactly is appearing in what she's saying? And she makes the terrific observation that the woman who is appearing is predicting the course of history. And how can that be on a planet that has free will and in a universe that's designed on free will? Who is this woman who's appearing that is predicting the course of history? And of course, those scrolls that were found in Rennes-le-Château in around 1890 in the leg of the altar of the Church of the Magdalene, they predict the coming of a woman to Fatima. And at Fatima, on October 13, 1917, she begins to predict the coming of Russia, the end of the First World War, the coming of the Second World War. Her pope would come 70 years, consecrate the world to her, et cetera, and then communism would be a huge problem. So as she's coming, yeah.
For a moment, okay, I just want to bookmark that. I just want to clarify, because I'm having a little trouble hearing you, and I'm not sure if Sean can help you correct that, but you're saying that this all was predicted. So instead of having free will, everything is set in stone? Is that kind of what you're discovering? It's what my fellow panelists were saying. We're in a cage, and it's not free will. We have free will to go and get groceries. We can go to the sex shop. We can go bowling. But for the major decisions of what this human body is capable of doing, what our minds are capable of doing, what kind of machine we're really living in, we're not given instructions that way.
So we're free here to move around a little bit like ants in the colony. But as I said, our overall capacity is not, it's hardly ever discussed. And when you do, you're labeled a wacko. Well, I have been in two different places. I was in Sweden and Philadelphia at the same time. I was in Toronto and Sweden at the same time. I'm a contractor before I was a lawyer, and so I'm taught concrete principles of how to build a house. I never thought that would happen to me, but when it happens to you, it happens.
You're saying you were bilocating?
Time becomes suspended. Yeah, I was on the sofa of a fellow researcher. I was going to Spain to see, and I was here in Toronto at the same moment. We were Skyping at the time, and she said, "Where are you now?" The cat just took off from the sofa. I said, "I'm on your sofa right beside you. I'm there and I'm here at the same time." I couldn't believe it. It happened in Philadelphia as well with the same researcher. We were being shown. We were told before this happened, we're going to be shown how the Stargate works. And I didn't say, "Oh, BS." I said, "Bring it." And that's what I was writing about in my third book, Sacred Sex and the Stargate. So to finish my thought from before, because we're in such a cage and such shock all the time, right up to 9/11, which was meant to be an event to shock the consciousness of the world that you wouldn't be able to think in the next critical 15 years. And Marciniak's pointing to 2015, from 2012 to 2015 being key years, and 2017 being the key year of this massive awakening on the planet to our capacity. And that's when they hit 9/11 in 2001. And so for 30 years, we'd be in a mass global amnesia. And the whole time, who's fighting against that is this woman who keeps appearing and saying, "No, that's not the way it's going to go. This is the way it's going to go." As if she's orchestrating it. Fatima, she appeared in 1830 at Paris. She appeared at Lourdes. She appeared at Fatima. She appeared at Garabandal in 1963. Ricardo Montalban did the YouTube voiceover. When you see the seer of the Virgin, her head goes back at midnight. She's promised communion by Archangel Michael, and the head went back in the video, and about a quarter-inch thick host appears on her tongue magically in the town square. And that seer, Conchita, said what she was told: "You'll have 3 more popes. One will reign for a short period." That was John Paul I. "And then my pope will come and will consecrate Russia to the Virgin. But if it's not done to Ninma, if it's done to the Virgin Mary, then communism will go underground." And that's its most dangerous form. So now we have the link between London Bank and Beijing Bank and now communism. Beijing politicians have enough money. They have a blank check to purchase all the land that they can in Africa, in America, and they're on a buying spree, foreclosing on mortgages, etc. And that is the worst form of communism. They are now taking over the land. Next is the water. Next to go is the water. And here's this woman fighting against it. So how to get us out of this is to teach people that this is happening. Anybody can channel. Anybody can, what did you call it, Janet? Bilocate? What did you call it, Janet?
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah. Anybody can. You're wired to do this. Ninma wired, especially the female. She gave him a little extra punch, Janet. But the men are a little slow to catch on. The females have the intuition of how to do this. There's no instructions. So everybody, it's happened to me. It can happen to anybody.
Wow, fascinating. I'm going to give the other two a chance to respond, but I think this ties in very closely to what Clay and the Linkage Institute were bringing, that we can do this. So, Karen, what would you like to say back to you?
Yeah, one of the things that notes I wrote down for myself, excuse me, was to talk a little bit about these concepts of remote viewing, extension neurosensing, or going astral or out of body, but I'll talk about the first two because this is an experiential thing for me. When I was 7 years old, I now know for certain because I've now talked to other people in the same program. I was pre-identified as a gun person potentially for remote viewing training. Now, the thing about me personally was I had signs of being a remote viewing adept, except for the fact that I was legally blind. I was the little girl with the big Coke bottle glasses. I actually couldn't see much past my nose. I had severe astigmatism. So this was a very confusing thing for the people trying to figure out what to do with me, because I had been receiving notes of information by some means or another, but it wasn't necessarily visual. And this figures in later, because remote viewing is kind of like when you have a horse and you want it to go in a straight line and you put blinders on and you aim it for the direction you want it to go, and it's kind of narrow focus. And remote viewer protocol pretty much is to go find a target, look for whatever they're supposed to look for, report back through the protocol. What was happening to me was I was finding out information, but it wasn't visible. It was, I could actually kind of feel energy. It was audible. It was being, talking to me. And so they were like wondering, how's this girl getting this information? She's only a 7-year-old. And the term they used was she sure has a broadened group of experiences. In other words, I was talking a little bit above my, first grader level about a lot of things. And so later on when I run into the material of A.R. Borden, and they use this term extension neurosensing, and another term, the point of view or your POV, I finally started to figure out what I was doing. And that is I was kind of putting my whole self out there, not using the visual, or even using the visual of another being or another person. And it was using the Mesner field and everything that Clay was talking about. You're literally extending yourself. So that's just the extension and neurosensing, and you're using all of your capacity as a human to know stuff, to pick it out of the nostril field, to feel it, to hear it, to taste it, to smell it. I mean, whatever, other than visual for me. Later I was able to develop my visual. But the reason why I want to talk about that is what I learned from doing that over the years and didn't really know quite what I was doing, and found the terminology of the life physics group so helpful was it started to put a name on what it was I was doing. One time I encountered a being, and I did not realize I did this until he said this, but he said, "Do not look through my eyes." And I went, "What?" "Do not look through my eyes." And then I realized that part of the way I was developing myself visually, and my eye condition improved as I got older, was I literally was putting my point of view, my attention engine, the focus of my attention, through somebody else in the room. And I didn't know I was doing that until this being told me that. And so I began to realize that I was, very early on managing my difficulties with the disability by using some kind of alternative sensing. And then in my latter days, now as an older person, I can now look back and see, oh, that's how I was doing that. And this is why I found the A.R. Borden material, the life physics group material, so compelling, once it gave me ideas and words to help me know what it was that I was doing. Then as I began to open myself more and more, and I had to throw up a lot of programming that came from religion, that came from school, that came from our society, to tell me that this was my imagination, that it wasn't possible, that I was crazy, maybe demonically inspired. There's a lot of negative memes thrown at people who suddenly find themselves that they're very psychic and they can know information and they don't know how. And so what I kind of wanted to throw in here at the beginning was that I personally believe that all humans have this capacity. I think we all have it to some extent or another. Of course, like music, you didn't have to work really hard and practice, and some people can sit down to a piano and play it the first time they see it. There's variance in ability. But I think most of it is overcoming our belief system. And so we are at that time now where these gifts and abilities are going to help us overcome the negative programming that we've had. And our society, 2017 works for me, I'm good with that, that we suddenly click as a bio kind with a shared bio mind And suddenly it's like the internet. We used to have independent, computers that, we could do lots of things with them, but it got a lot more fun to get on the internet. And now my internet connection or my computer is a portal to something shared. In computer terms, we call it the cloud. In light physics group, we call it the cumulus. It's the same thing. The morphogenetic field, the morphogenic field. It's that shared space we have always had. But due to the experiment we're doing right now, we forgot that we had. So I just want to kind of explain where I was coming from in coming into this, and I'm enjoying everyone's comments. Thank you.
Okay, Sasha, you want to take a turn, then go to Clay?
Okay, yeah, so it's really interesting in the way I look at things, because sort of the all-chakra yoga, is that it's a matter of embracing the opposites within you so that you can allow the things that you can see as a diagnostic, what really bugs you in other people or in the structure is really parts of you. If you just assume that all those things that you hate outside are generated by your not coming to full grips with the needs that motivate them within inside you, then you haven't worked it through. But when you feel what inside you motivates you to feel greedy or competitive to an extreme, then you can look at the needs of those whom you're opposing. And it's a very difficult thing to do at different levels of our consciousness. But when you learn to actually consult each level, your vulnerability and your protector, that's your first chakra, your sensuality and your empowerment, your giving and taking, your communication or privacy, your understanding or your intuition and so forth, so that you really are able to simultaneously, and this is the topological thinking of Borden too, as well as centering, you can automatically simultaneously experience more than one level of consciousness without abandoning any levels. You don't transcend something by cutting it away. It becomes subsumed in a big synergy, and it's a lot of fun. You make a coherent field with the creator of all, and become that creator, so to speak.
So if you're continually projecting and rejecting, that's the wound, and the wound is outside. But if you own it and embrace it, you can do something about it. Back to you, Clay. Or Quanta.
It makes me think too about something Glenn said with free will, which is, there's a big difference between free will and true will, I guess, and we live in an environment where we have access to true will, but we have no idea what our potential is, and so we are limited. Even if we're given the option, we don't know to choose the option. So one thing that's this cage that Glenn called it, or a prison, or whatever you want to call it, is that the littlest things are what I think absorb the most chi out of you. They take the most energy from you. So everything from when you spend money in a restaurant or buy drinks at a bar, or somebody cuts you off in traffic, those are the things that I guess eat away your charge on a regular basis, a daily basis, when your alarm clock goes off and when you go to work, and you allow all this stress to kind of chronically be absorbed by you, on day one of your job, and then 10 years or 15 years later, you're at the same job, or multiple nowadays, I guess. But I became really aware of how this energy gets taken from you, whether it's people or your own doing. But I think life physics talks about these levels of manifestation, these layers of dimensionality, and that's something Glenn could, and Karen, when you talk about bilocation, that's kind of like a glimpse of what your awareness has the capacity to absorb all things all at once. But, it's so difficult to believe and to experience. I mean, people talk about this stuff when they've taken mushrooms or something, but it's not something I've never done it, so I wouldn't know, but I've heard of other people's experiences, and I've had my own kind of meditations and stuff. But when I think about dimensionality, and I think about the way that reality can be changed so quickly, that I'm not so concerned about these externalized. Of course, I am to some degree, because I'm not perfect or ascended. I'm still here, but it makes things less serious or less fearful when you realize that you're kind of projecting this out there so that you can learn.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's kind of like shotgun points, but that's
yeah, that's right.
Okay. Are you complete? I can pass
I think so, yeah. Sure,
okay,
sure.
We'll
I like to hear. Okay.
Okay, Glenn, your turn. What would you like to share this round?
Well, I was also reading this past weekend, or rereading a book called Serpent in the Garden. It's by an Irish scholar who studied at Harvard. And so like Dr. Lesson came out of UCLA, these are people who are studying at a very high level. And she, of course, went into the biblical story of what happened to Eve exactly, and what Corey's talking about when you had to shock the female mind to get it to stop working. And she made the point that, I mean, I talked to biologists on the weekend, and they were, of course, dyed-in-the-wool evolutionists, and it was a slow-creeping evolution going up to mankind. And, of course, Barbara Marciniak says, absolutely no, we have nothing in common with Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal man. We've only been here 200,000 years. That's been proven by DNA research at National Geographic in Washington. It's called the Genographic Project. We can trace all the races of the world back to one woman living in Ethiopia. And the scholar, Spencer Wells, he lectured in Philadelphia. I was in the audience when he said, but this is not an Eve. And, of course, my hand shot up, Janet, and said, it sure sounds like Eve. And they're just so trained not to think that the Garden of Eden was a genetic experiment where a female scientist was brought here, Ninmah, and changed the ape into human being. And then Enki put his advanced sperm in by fornicating with the daughters of Eve in Genesis 6:4. It's right there. He fornicated with the daughters of Eve, putting very advanced sperm in and creating Homo sapien sapiens. So this author, and I'll have to think of her name in a second, it's called Serpent in the Garden. She said, well, what did Eve know? Nobody told Eve. El did not tell Eve not to eat from that tree. He told Adam. Eve comes across the tree, eats the fruit, gains knowledge, finds it delicious, and gives the delicious fruit to her husband. And for that, she's lambasted as a temptress. And that label, there's only two women in history that challenged El. One was Eve, and the other one was the sister of Moses, Miriam. She wanted her half of the share. Her brother's getting the whole show, and it's supposed to be 50-50. And Miriam was, of course, punished for standing up to Yahweh. So from that point forward, from Pleiadians was brought, or from Orion. No, from Orion was brought this cage, this mechanism of harnessing or limiting the psyche of the female, and they're just coming out of it now. On December 13th, my research of 2013, that's when Aquarius started officially, and now we're moving into the age of the female, where they are waking up all over the world, and when they clue into shows like this that can begin to teach. I guess A.R. Borden, I don't know his work, other than being on this panel, but these techniques of how to change the reality in front of you. The short answer is it comes from inside of you. It doesn't come from the universe and praying to the universe as we thought before. It's now coming directly from inside of you. Your higher self now is invited down into the human frame, and that will reconnect the unplugged, quote-unquote, junk DNA. Go ahead.
Okay, for me, the Adam and Eve story and the apple was symbolic of the genetic manipulation where they were able to procreate, and that was an influx of, what was it, from Nigashita, where he took Enki and Nima and laid them down, took genetic material, they called it the rib, and he introduced the ability to procreate to the current version of Adam and Eve that were there in the lab with him. You want to say something?
Oh, well, this first Eve was we've got from our Sumerian sources, incredible. This was an amazing child. She was evidently the first self-conscious person of our exact species. Enki brought her back from his place in Zimbabwe, and then he went back to his place in Basara. And Eve was just, her name was Tiamat, actually, was pregnant, and she was so happy that she really had an experience while she was having sex with Adamu, of being conscious of herself as a separate person, and feeling the coherent feel with Adam, and that experience. She bustled around like a very, very intelligent Anunnaki child. When the neighbor came by, who was Yahweh, Enlil, Tiamat went right up to her and said, "Hi, who are you? I'm Tiamat. Look, I made this clothes to wear, and look at the table I made. Isn't it cute?" And Enlil was really pissed. He said, "Put this guy in chains," and Enki all chained, and Tiamat was beside himself. "What's the matter with this guy? He's crazy. Look what he's doing to Daddy." And of course, everybody came down on Enlil and said, "This is ridiculous. These people can breed the slave race that we need for the mind." And so that's when Enlil said, "We'll take them back to Zimbabwe and let them breed." Anyway, here's back to Janet.
All right. But all this ties together. We're getting there, listeners, so bear with us. Karen, we're coming back to you. What would you like to do this round? And we do have the top of the hour is at 56:48, just to keep an eye on the clock.
Okay. Well, I'll just make a short comment then, because this is why I find this story so interesting, because we have two intentions for humanity kind of battling. One is to have a primitive worker who's going to work in the mines and is going to obey and is going to get the gold for the Anunnaki masters, and just kind of a robotic kind of thing. And that seems to be what our control systems push us into. But we have this spark of the divine, the spark of life within us that's the same as the Anunnaki beings. They're not any different than us. They're just a different species. We've got that spark of the divine that for us to be independent and us to, convince us to do the thing for you, and we can do this for you, not, overlord it. So those are the two systems. We have the two kinds of humans. We have humans that want to overlord and say, do this, do that, boss us around, that we're, makes us and continue to perpetuate this pyramidal system. And we have this beautiful gift of imagination and capacity to be independently minded. And that seems to be the experiment. Which kind of human's going to bring us into the next level of our development? Go ahead.
Yeah, the geneticists really said, I hope that these, they kept adding to the genes. Another 100,000 years, they had even more babies. In any case, with the slave race, is to do better than we did, to stop warring, to stop killing each other. They have the genes of Homo erectus, which is Bigfoot's ancestor, which is they're compassionate, they empathize. We've lost something, they've got it, and boy, are they fertile. Wish we were that fertile. So they had a lot of hopes for us, and now is when those hopes are supposed to come to fruition. Now is the dawning of the age. Glenn, you're right on. This is the age of Aquarius. And the reality is, Enki has realized that Nima is his partner, and he isn't into dominating like the other dude that controlled the space.
Over to you, Ray.
I think that's why a lot of these kind of more negative groups and sects and orders, and they use the term negative harvest a lot, and I think it's kind of a cue term to mean that there's a separation, there's this great divide that's being brought in through this great age is going to, in some ways, try to create a reality that's something that's more accommodative for their vibrational level, and then we're the ones that kind of are able to let go of a lot of the fear-based, trauma-based programming that we have. We kind of move into something else that's more positive. But I want to say, Glenn, it's awesome that, because you practice law and that type of thing, that you're bringing legitimacy to a lot of these types of conversations. And myself, I was in finance and investment banking, and I got in some technology startups. But to have a conversation like this with somebody else that's considered a legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate type of profession, now it seems like way more people are receptive to this type of information. And I'm having conversations with people about this casually, just in passing, and people they perk up or they want to hear more about it, and it's almost like they're being cued that it's not crazy, that they should listen. I started a band here where I am, and my keyboard player is getting a PhD, so he's heavily indoctrinated into physics and science, and especially a lot of mechanistic and separatist type of systems. But he's like, we have conversations, and he's like, that doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. This is you have to prove it. I got to see it with my own two eyes and hold the evidence in my hand. But then he's like, well, do you have any? Can you send me some stuff? I know this sounds kind of trite for people listening, but this person is so heavily left-brained and so heavily into the evidence and the physical nature of how everything works that it's extremely eye-opening for me to see people like that are becoming more receptive to this type of information. It's really like we're riding a wave, and even people that are still kind of quote unquote sleeping a little bit, it's almost like this stuff is it's like a meme on the internet. It's like a distributed network, a peer-to-peer distributed network, like a torrent file that's really popular. And you go on a torrent site, like if you're downloading movies, and you see it, and you're like, why is this movie so popular? And it keeps getting more popular, and you're like, I guess I'll download this thing because it seems like everybody wants to watch this clip or this movie or this music file or something. It's becoming contagious, and I think that's where Rupert Sheldrake's his morphogenetic field, and in physics we talk about the cumulus and the overfunction and this collective that's basically it's starting to seed into the public, but they don't know exactly how to articulate it. In a lot of cases, they don't know really where to go to find out anything else, and they don't believe their impulses. A lot of people ignore their impulses to find out more information about this stuff. But anyway, so it's exciting, but it's kind of depressing at the same time because, you still are in this cage. You're still here. Anyway.
And that's the quandary. How do we move past this? And perhaps that's what AR's legacy was, is to take these concepts of the Anunnaki, perhaps the powers that be, kind of negate it from our level of consciousness and reintroduce it. And so we're coming up on the top of the hour. We have like another minute. Josh, you want to say some words before the commercial comes on?
Well, alternative way is, instead of looking at getting past this, what about being here and really experiencing this as a perfect moment that couldn't be any other way, and the best there is, and it's absolutely appropriate. That's another way of looking at things. And if you have it that way, there's a lot to, I think, to appreciate in this wave of consciousness. We are what Preacher Gene says, a perturbation, a wave in the system. And we first started shaking things up in the 60s, and now there's such a big perturbation that the system is going to regenerate at a higher level of consciousness that's more inclusive of many more life forms and dimensions than before. And we're going to take our new partners, the Anunnaki, who are going to wind up accepting with us. Yay! We'll be back.
I'm on break. Special break. That's a good show. One guy's good. One guy's an investment banker. Thanks to Glenn on the show. He's a lawyer. It lends credibility to what's happening. The more and more people to talk to are getting curious what's happening.
Listen to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A. Tammy share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets in the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A with Tammy Snyder. Find out who's been watching over you from the other side, and soon with your angels.
Remote view. She could view.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to our host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Somebody don't have your phone muted, and your please mute until we get done with this reintroduction back to the program. Thank you very much. So I'm your host, Janet Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we are in a panel discussion with GlennBogue, KarenPatrick, and KarenPatrick on the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Before we get back to our show, it's a very interesting, exciting show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on the freedomslips.com website, and please make a donation. Whatever you can afford to do would be greatly appreciated. $1, $5, $10, $15, $20, $100, whatever you can donate. We do thank you very much for your donation, which allows us to bring these shows to you. So let's see. I just want to say before we go back to the panel that as a Tantra person, I'm a woman, I'm a Tantric person, and I've used my Tantric practice to go into these orgiastic states with my beloved who helped facilitate me and either one-on-one rituals or groups, and we were to open the Stargate. I was able to open the Stargate and go up through the levels of consciousness, encounter extraterrestrials, and go all the way to what I call a high five with Source, God Source, and reconnecting with the oneness in that great stillness, the Om, and then coming back down through the dimensions to my human form. So I believe that Nimrod and her fellow genesis, Enki, and maybe she the top, perhaps created the human species able to hold heaven on earth, meaning that they could access all the realms through the dimensions, through the levels of existence, up to source, and still remain incarnated in human form without having to die. And that, I think, was their quandary, that they wanted to create a species that was more conscious and enlightened, that's able to become enlightened. The Anunnaki were not enlightened, although they had other abilities, which AR was in touch with the Anunnaki. Let's see, let's go back to, Dr. Lesson.
Glenn should have this.
Oh, yeah, Glenn, you didn't get to finish your turn before the break. Okay, back to you, Glenn. We'll go back to Karen after that. Go ahead, Glenn, take it away.
I appreciate the comment about being a lawyer and able to bring some credence. I also have a master's degree in history, and was an Olympic sprinter at one time. Although I'm a little white guy, I was one of the fastest runners in the world in high school, and that's an example of just being in a system of belief where you have captains ahead of you and coaches who have been there and are telling you can do this. So you get this confidence. So it's the same thing about teaching people about strange things that are happening to them is now becoming normal. I was on a job site, construction job site with one of my workers, and it was a black fellow, African American, and I wanted to know what was going on in that community. I was doing my research for my book 3 on sacred sex. And out he comes with this wild story 20 years ago. He's making love to his girlfriend over the kitchen table, and both of them looked down, and their feet were disappearing slowly up their calves to mid-thigh. Then he withdrew himself, pulled his pants up, and went home and never talked to that girl again. But I wanted to know, did they have oral sex, and was she vegetarian? Because the vegetarian lifestyle, the nutrition of the human cell is critical in bringing the body cells into what's called dry pack, where there's a very little water in between. As soon as you poison yourself with salt or white sugar or white flour, you get thirsty and you draw more water into the system, and you get tired until you eliminate that. But being a vegetarian woman, she would be in tight pack, and having oral sex, there's a certain substance that my theory is that the female can produce during heightened sexual arousal. But this is happening, I think, in a lot of places. I talked to the mini tramp guy who's one of the seller sizer designer, David Hall, about my theories, and I wanted to order more mini tramps for my clients because it puts your body into dry pack state. Gravity will squeeze all the crap out, all the debris, and put you in dry pack. And that fellow told me that many of his clients call on the 3rd and 4th month of being on the mini tramp, and they have strange things happening in the bedroom. So these things are happening all over the planet with this higher energy that's coming in. Right now, I think today is the highest level of gamma rays ever recorded. They go up every 3,600 years with the approach of Nibiru, I think, but they tend to climb up, and at the end of 3,600-year cycles, oddly enough, it's the period of Nibiru. But now is the highest that we've had, and this is why this is being driven all over the planet. Just that we're not used to it. We don't want to embarrass ourselves, but we have no common place to go to. You can't go to your imam or to the bishop with this kind of stuff. They're not experiencing this, or maybe they are, but no one's talking about it. So I just threw caution to the wind and talked to everybody, and it's a lot easier now than it was 20 years ago. Back to you.
Okay, Karen, your turn.
Well, yeah, I think the rise of odd things happening in my research is there's a lot of discussion of this is a very strange period of time. And speaking of time, I've been having a lot of conversations with people lately about their perception of time. Either that they feel like their timeline is altered, their something in their past has changed. There's this observation called the Mandela effect, where people are having different remembrances of common experiences, media personalities, politicians, and other people who we thought were passed away, and suddenly they're back into our reality construct, or how the spelling of different words are. And that might seem kind of trivial, or people would think that, to give an example, Charles Schultz, the artist who did the Peanuts series that I grew up with, his name, for some people, was spelled, his last name Schultz was spelled a German name with a T. And with other people, they don't ever remember there being a T there before, and now it doesn't have a T. It's just, without that. And so there's these discussions now happening about what is going on. Like, are we having a convergence of various timelines coming together? And our perception of our reality is changing. It's a lot of discussion about the quantum hologram theory, which I kind of starts to cover a lot of these things, is that we're really perceiving in a quantum hologram. So our perception and our attention and what we pay attention to and focus is also based on where we're coming from. And we could be, two people could be having two different realities standing right next to each other because of their perception. And I think I like what Clay was saying about having conversations with people that you swear were the most left-brain, logical, materials-oriented person you could possibly think, and suddenly you're having a spiritual conversation, actually interested in what you're saying, whereas before they would have just blown you off. And it seems like there is this shift, there is this change, and I think it's just very low-level perception. You have to be really paying attention to the differences in all these things, like I kind of sort of obsess over. But it's like that song, something's happening here. What it is, we ain't exactly clear. So I think if people are listening now, there might be people that they've never heard of stuff before, and all of a sudden they're interested in what we're talking about. This is we are a shared biokind, and we've been, I think, taken over by a thought, form, control, mechanistic machine of materialism and a spirituality that's materialistic. It's more interested in building up big caches of members and money and all those things. That's forgotten the most basic human perception of itself is to be the spark of the divine. So this isn't like a Chinese curse, right? You live in interesting times kind of curse. But yeah, I think the conversations I'm having now are so amazing compared to a few years ago. I felt like I was kind of the only one on my block who was thinking these things, and now it seems more and more just people you wouldn't even expect to believe. You're having those conversations and thinking about those things. So we're in interesting times.
Right. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Something Glenn said about sex, which is Glenn, I know you're not familiar with Life Physics Group, but one of the big reasons why it was seeded into the public was part of it had to do with manifestation of a physical object. A human body has the capability to manifest a physical object, anything basically that you can visualize in your mind's eye. And so A.R. Borden had written out the physics, the biophysics, and the quantum mechanical reactions that actually occur when that is instantiated, when it is actually done. And then he also wrote out the algorithm, the process by which you do it. So Kundalini is one of the methods that is utilized in this process, but you induce, through meditation, you induce what they use the term adren orgasm. It's where you have an orgasm that shoots up your spine. It's this chi, and this combination of different types of chi actually that shoot up your spine over your head, and it expels this energy out of your forehead, your heart, and your enteric or your gut chakra. They call it your enteric brain. But something I personally experienced as far as that goes. But sex is extremely powerful manifester, or it's a unionizing event that heightens intention. It coheres it extremely well. So I think a lot of people are going to start experiencing. When you brought up sex, it reminded me of that, because a lot of people are having these experiences. I also think people are whether they say it or not, which in many cases they won't because they don't know how to articulate it, they're experiencing sex in a very different way, or they will begin to experience it in a different way because their upper, especially in men, but you have these junctions, intersection points that people call chakras up to your head and your body and your heart. And those things start to become more active, I think, because of this whatever energy or this wave that we're riding in the environment. And it starts to open up more emotive centers, these sensing, feeling, empathetic types of connections that you have with other human beings. And so, I think that people are going to start questioning the way that they've gone about doing these things in the past. And they've probably experienced with some of these things, like you said, the legs disappearing and that type of thing. We'll probably also experience these will become more common. I've noticed too, I've read some of these forums on like reddit.com, which is like a very commercialized forum for people to post news headlines and stuff. And I skim them and see what just your average everyday guy posting, cat videos or pictures of his Mustang after he's washed it or something, or what he cooked for dinner. And you see people post stuff that it gets buried really quick, but it's really fascinating to see that it's fascinating to see people that are not kind of in the know, at least consciously, have these experiences and they don't know how to explain them other than to say, one guy posted and said, I was lifting weights and I had an orgasm while I was bench pressing. Is this normal? And he posted this on a forum and everybody was, trying to figure out what just happened, what he was posting and what it meant. And it was nobody really had anything to say about it because they didn't know either. But I think these occurrences will become more common. It's weird, but it's also kind of encouraging to see people becoming aware, whether they want to or not.
The system you pose is very much like the one we use in All Chakra Tantra, where you go through each of your energy centers has its own sound, and you go through them in a single exhale. It's Lam, Ram, Ram, Yam, Ham, Om, and you do the belly hold, pelvis hold, and pulse, and you connect heaven and earth through your inhale and exhale, and let yourself be a bridge. And that's part of the meditation that's built right into. And then if you're with a beloved, you're sitting with one of you, have your legs over the other's hips, you're looking at each other's eyes, and first you're breathing at the same time in and out, then one of you exhaling to the other as the other inhales, and you're opening, I love you and you love me, with your inhale and exhale through each one of those chakras, in your vulnerability, in your sensuality, in your power, in your love, in your communication, in your wisdom, and in your spiritualness, and in our oneness, we form a coherent field. We are a one with everything and everyone, and the creator of all, something like that.
Well, that just reminded me of the story that you told me, Sasha, when you were taking yoga, and at the end of the yoga exercise, there was one procedure, everybody was having a Kundalini orgasm. So I think this disconnect we have between our sexual nature and, our walking, waking, normal life is artificial, and that as we start to reintegrate all the parts of ourselves, we'll realize that we are an orgasmic energy being. An orgasm could be anything. You could be looking at a sunset and you have an orgasm. Orgasms are just energy that runs through you that awakens your Kundalini, and the Kundalini reconnects you to Source and your oneness, and remembering that you are all one and connected to the totality of existence. I got lost on who was next.
Well, what we're saying is that it's really good to, when you're making love, to say that you're going to form a single unit, and you're going to open yourself for contact with the Anunnaki, who would wish to communicate in a loving way with humanity. Empower lovemaking as a ritual to communicate with the Anunnaki is what I suggest.
I think it's Glenn's turn, then back to Karen. Okay. Glenn, your turn. Sorry, Glenn, your turn.
Corey and I are on the same wavelength, because I had heard a story just last week. There was a young child of a friend of mine, said he was hungry, he wanted an apple, and he produced the apple spontaneously right there in his hand. And now you're telling me that there's a algorithm or mathematical calculation that shows how this So this has just happened last week when I come on these shows with the lessons. This is exactly what happens. Another note that you said, I was driving in Toronto when I first got home from living in the States for 40 years, and it was a drive-in, morning talk show, and on there was a sex therapist, and all these women were calling in having had these spontaneous orgasms at the gym. And they're all wondering what is going on at the gym. I was trying to call into the show from my cell phone. So it's not that in the gym, it's in the atmosphere. The female's auric field is picking up this highly intense energy going on now. And the third thing I'll say on this turn is that I was reading Bruce Lipton's work, Biology of Belief, and he was chronicling how it got to be that DNA took the huge leap that they gave it of being the key thing when epigenetics is what he was one of the founding researchers in epigenetics. The mind thought has to go first, and then you express the genes. But he was talking about the a protein sleeve goes over the DNA and pulls back to let it express, and that the protein sleeve is just as important or more important than the usually dormant DNA. And when we go back to nutrition, when we go back to nutrition of the cell, it was shown at Columbia University back in the 60s that when you cook a protein, and this is huge for the listeners, when you cook a protein, your body can't use it and has to get rid of it through the colon. And as the colon backs up, of course, everything else begins to back up with water. They try to put it out your kidney, and now the kidney filters are getting blocked. And this is what inflammation is. This is the weight that Americans are carrying around, often gallons and gallons of water weight they're carrying around, which is interfering with this experience. Now, suppose you could have it and have this water retention, but I think it's so much easier to let the cells do their thing. And the last thing I'll say is that in the 50s, they showed that I think it was 20 minutes of sunlight created a 200% increase in testosterone in both males and females. And so the hormones are still something I don't think science can accurately describe. We know what they do, of course, in the body, but what it's actually made of, where it gets its energy from, is critical. So being out in the sun, don't eat cooked proteins, and let the body go into dry pack state, and look out. Back to you.
Yeah, could I say something really quick? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want. I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to say really quick. A.R. Borden used to say DNA is cool, but RNA is where the real action is. Which basically, Glenn, to follow your point, is that that the way charge accelerates into a cell, it comes from the environment. The RNA, the skin that surrounds a cell, reads the environment first. That's how it codes.
Yes.
So when we go through this process, especially through the meditation, and AR and some of these other guys wrote out the algorithm, the actual process you go through to induce these effects so that you can manifest a physical object or a physical experience. And these orders and sects, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Knights Templars, Malta, all these guys, yogis, they all have their own process by doing but it's all the same science. They utilize the exact same process and methods for doing it. They call it different things, but they have to work on themselves first, and then it becomes they become more conducive. They become more of a conduit for allowing the environment to code their intention, or allowing their intention to code the environment, rather. But sex is a unionizer, because now what's happening is especially the root chakra is kind of opening, I think. It's opened in me. During meditation, it literally just opened, and it felt like a warm, somebody turned on a spigot of energy, and it just rushed up through my body as it opened. But I think that's happening to more people. So these blockages are getting released. Kind of fingers are coming out of the dams, so to speak, and allowing this energy to flow up through the body more. But I think that's why sex is becoming different, and I also think that's why people are, like you said, people calling in this talk show, going, I don't understand what happened to me at the gym. But that's why sex is such a sacred thing for a lot of these orders. And like the Da Vinci Code scenario in the book, anyway, where the girl walks in and there's a big circle of people that are hooded, and then there's people having sex in the middle. That's called a Kabbalistic geometry, where they basically have a focused intention on an outcome or a thing, and they utilize a sacred female and a male during the sex act, and then that allows them to manifest more powerfully because there's conjoined intention. I'm kind of getting on a tangent. I know it's Karen's turn. I just wanted to kind of elaborate on that just for a sec.
Let me just interject that that's called sex magic in Tantra. And so you have to be really careful what your focus and intention is when you're in sacred ritual, because you're moving sexual energy, you can create it. And that's what they do in the satanic rituals. They use sexual energy to create their negative timeline or the negative paradigm. And also that's what they did at Montauk. They were using sexual energy to, create an alternative timeline or to take hold of the timeline. That's why they had a little Montauk boys. And they were definitely playing with that and entheogens or LSD and other types of chemicals. So go ahead, Tosh.
Well, it's interesting to look at where a lot of this came to Earth when Anu, the king of Nibiru, came in 3850 BCE to Earth. They prepared his grandniece, Inanna, to be his lover, and the king's wife, Antu, was with him, and it taught her all the tricks of being really a great lover, and she became his courtesan. And when she was given the Indus Valley as her fief, she had tantric temples. This altar place right in Iraq, in a town called Uruk, her personal town. So so the tantric tradition, which the Anunnaki used to make a perfect coming together of people for fertility. They were really into making babies and having a pleasure together. It was a spiritual creation from sexual pleasure. And Uruk was famous for its a house of pleasures. And this is that tradition that the Anunnaki started with, this Anu and his grandniece Inanna, and this goes right on through to modern times. That's the way to the whole group held hands and watched and felt the vibes as Anu and Inanna came together, and they breathed together with her, and they breathed together with him, and they all got higher. They all raised their chi together.
Karen, we haven't heard from you in a while. Karen.
No, I've just been enjoying everyone's comments. I wanted to go back to the child that was able to manifest that apple on command, and then we talked about that in Life Sacred Truth, Light Encoded Reality Matrix. All these terms that we had I just called it Shazamming an apple to simplify it for me. But what I kind of thought as I thought through that over time, it's interesting to me where we are as a collective, planetary level. We have this, the have and have not seem to be running on opposite ends of this track. We have the rich getting richer and the poor getting poor, and the food supply being reduced and limited, and GMOs and all that stuff starts to put a stress on our species, on our biokind. And a term that kind of popped in my head one day that kind of helped me put some things out was that sooner or later the threat to the species, it's to the whole species, even if some people are benefiting, it's not really benefiting if they get so far, up in the upper atmosphere of way up above their peers, they're not part of the human race anymore. And I think what happens is, I think there is a baseline implicate order thing of a species that a biological imperative comes, and that's if we are going to practice this limitation, practice this what I call thanatos culture, death culture, there's going to be life asserting itself in a biological imperative that if you continue to deprive humans of human food, of course little children will go, well, I can get the food, I can just do this. They have no limits to their thoughts as we've been trained to do as older people. And I think the stresses on us might just very, very well propel us into a very sudden change in the human species experience, perhaps altogether. And I think it's like a feedback loop. You can only stretch that thing around so much, and we're going to pop back into frequency of one another because we are a human species together. And we're not just individuals having experiences. We are a species together, a biokind, having an experience together. We can't walk away from that. And one of the things that my contact with my Anunnaki ancestor suggested to me was that we are not that removed from them. That one of the things that drives them up the wall about us is that we're their mini-me. We're their mini-me little beings shorter than them, running around just like when you have your child who acts just like you in the supermarket in an unflattering way. We're so much like them that we affect them. It's not just that they come down from us on high and tell us what to do and what to think and what to wear and how, and they're our masters. They're our family. And the kind of the secret here is just like our family members can kind of drive each other up the wall or even have shared ecstatic experiences. That connection is there too, and they cannot get away from that. They cannot get away from the fact that we are them and they are us. And so the biological imperative is we're going to catch up with them, but in some ways, based on the history, being they're kind of selfish and violent and very proud, and maybe with not so much the empathy that we have gained by other parts of our DNA. We're going to affect them in that way. We're going to bring them into empathy in ways that, and in a capacity for looking at each other as equals instead of superiors and inferiors. So I just kind of wanted to throw that bit in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh, you want to say something?
I have a horrible joke that came into my mind. No. So I won't tell it.
Thank you, Glenn. Good, we got saved. I'm glad you.
Well, I was watching. We're talking about the power that's inside the human beings. I was watching a TED Talk a couple months ago, and it was this neuroscientist in Boston. She was a woman, and she was all left brain her whole life. Until one morning she got up and she had an aneurysm in the left brain, and she had to rely on the right brain. And the events that went on around her, her arm could go through the wall because the left brain is the side that controls the dimension of the room and the space that she's in. After several hours of wandering around, she finally got hold of her partner at the next lab over, lab next to her, and when she was in this state with no left brain, she said, I was huge. I was so many thousands and thousands of miles across, and my spirit was out of my body and flying all over. And they, of course, fixed the left side aneurysm or clot, whatever was there. And back in she came, like vacuum packed into this tight little body again. There's a channel here called Red in just outside Toronto I went to see about a month ago. And he was talking about how we're coming along as spirit when we reach a star. And that's the energy that we ride in here on as light. The energy from that star shoots right through the sun, and the sun then double accelerates the energy, and that's what's required to get the soul slammed into that uterus, into the baby. And that is the solar capacity that's sitting inside of us that we just got to find the on button for, which is apparently here now, that we can be in two places at once. We can be in two universes at once. I think one of the key things is to get with a partner who is on the same wavelength as you are, and makes it far easier to experience these events, which I guess would be like an eternity. When I went to Sweden and back, and the 2 times that I did this, no time had gone by. They were simultaneous realities. I'm still typing on on the internet, on Facebook, or Skyping at the same time as the alternate events were happening around me, the alternate experience. And so it has to be a form of eternity that we, as with the solar capacity that we have, once we know we have it, boom. It's no different than being an Olympian who's taught you can do this. And suddenly, one day you can. Back to you.
Right.
That was an MIT scientist too, or neuroscientist, a brain surgeon.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a great video. Great video. Yeah, there's in occult orders and stuff, they use a term called the left-hand path, which is basically by overusing the left hand in a lot of cases, you actually stimulate the right brain hemisphere, which helps unlock a lot of the programming that you have with your left brain.
I have a bad joke, Dr. Lesson.
That's why we're all right-handed.
I got to start using the left hand.
Hey. We figured it out.
It's interesting. Instead of thinking about what we can be and so forth, maybe our intention is manifest. Our intention, just like the molecules in the experiments you alluded to, is being manifest, and it has to be being manifest right now and couldn't be any other way if you really think it through. It seems to me that this reality is what we have created, etc.
Right. This is divine play, Leela. We've created it, so we can do it all.
We are doing it all.
We are doing it all. All right, I'm just going to go, we're just going to go, we call it popcorn. If you have something to say, just interject, because we only have another 20 minutes, and this show's been going fast. So who wants to talk next to kind of imagine there's a talking and grab it? All right, that's talking. Come on, guys.
I just like, the reason I like talking about the manifestation process so much is because it makes it more, it feeds it into the population. It makes it more real. So that's why I'm so glad Karen brought that up a while ago, and Glenn. One thing the Anunnaki, from my own personal, just my own contact, and then also through life physics, was they keep saying, look, you got to help yourself. This is all for you to help yourself. Like, we can't do anything for you to the degree that, they can give you love and support, but they can't do anything for you. So that's one of the reasons I really took to the whole life applications practices that were from Life Physics Group, and then above, some of my own research and studies with other groups and my own stuff, was the emotional processing, and then the manifestation. That blew my mind to be able to see the physics, the science as to how that actually functions on a very, very technical level, because that made my left brain extremely okay with the process, which is something that was hard for me to kind of believe. I kind of was so intrigued by it, but I didn't really have a deep, this is real type of a belief. I just had this is interesting. But the more you hear stories about that, like you said, Glenn, and the more Karen, you brought that up a while ago, it's extremely important that it gets talked about more and more, because I think it becomes more of a reality for all of us.
I'd like to throw in because a wonderful phrase I learned in life physics was, everything is earned in this creation, meaning that nobody can do this for you. This is something you have to pursue for yourself, and you just go for it. Like, meditate, try to do stuff, try to do different ideas that you've heard. Do this for yourself, because no one can explain it to you satisfactorily. And it's just like you can't ride your kid's bicycle for them. They have to get on the bicycle and ride themselves. And learn what your human instrument can do by any technique that's kind of in front of you. A lot of people are so afraid, they're made to feel so afraid to try anything spiritual, meditation. I used automatic writing to help my communication expand so I could have interaction eventually telepathically with beings. And I have to say that the telepathic connection with beings is kind of a strange feeling. And the feeling is it's your imagination. And that's the gate. That's the gate. We say, oh, that's just your imagination. And I say, the image in, I shine, right? We image in this, and we shine, and we learn. And when I am in communication telepathically with a being, it feels like it's my idea. I think I'm thinking it out. But I find that the information over time is new information. New information is a wonderful way for anybody to break out of patterns, learn something more about it. If you don't know something about it, learn more. And be, self-responsible, self-learning, self-taught. Read, hear our show today, read up on something. But it's a DIY universe, I think. Do it yourself, right? And then you'll have that feeling of it. And once you catch that feeling of it and that frequency, you can improve and try something else, and you begin to progress. And that's the one good thing about getting in touch with your inner Anunnaki and your guides, is to help you do it yourself and learn it yourself and get this feeling of it. And this isn't going to be something that you're going to take a pencil and paper. It's not like being in school or college. It's experiential. Thank you.
Hi, Janet. Hi, this is Noreen. I'm just tuning in. I didn't mean to interrupt anybody on here. I'm just really enjoying this dialogue. This is actually the first time I've called in, and also the first time I've actually heard this show. I've heard the ads for it many times. I have a show on the station, but anyway, I'm really intrigued by this topic, and every time I hear the ad, you talk about tantra relationships and other tangential, related subjects, I just get really like, wow. And I never knew anything about the Anunnaki having this connection with this. This is like new to me, that aspect, and it's really amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we've been tying it all together. These are basically, I've been following my own interests, trusting my soul to guide me over the years. And I've always had a strong connection with the Anunnaki and extraterrestrials. I've been an experiencer going back to the crib. I've always been a very sexual being. And, of course, in this society, you get shamed for it. And so finally, with all these researchers and like Glenn and now we have Clay and everybody tying the connection together, the Anunnaki brought Tantra to the earth. There was a faction of the Anunnaki that wanted their Lulus, they called us. We were like pets to them, and they wanted us to become conscious and aware and enlightened. And they were kind of stuck, and they just only could go so far. They were still stuck in 3D material world. And so now we're actually the next level, the next rung in the evolution of consciousness for the Anunnaki. And for other species, apparently, have come down here and lent their DNA to this grand experiment of cosmic consciousness. Mm-hmm. Somebody else.
As far as something happening that's real, Karen was just saying, let it go, see what happens. The second time I went through magnetic field to Sweden, a corkscrew had come out of my head at the coffee shop I was at. And I'm going like, now what? And I used it like a fishing rod and threw it over the Newfoundland, and it had it land in Sweden when the cat jumped off the sofa. I fly over there the next day to meet the girl in Sweden. I walk in her apartment, and there on the shelf is a yogi master with a corkscrew coming out of his head. I mean, it's right there in front of me. The second thing I'll say, I'm reading Wilcox's book on the unified field, and maybe Clay can talk about this because what happened was in the early hypnosis stage, they hypnotized the father to not see his daughter. Then they brought the daughter and they put him right in front of her, and to prove that he couldn't see her, the hypnotist put a something in his hand and put it behind her back, it was a stopwatch or a pocket watch with an engraving on it, and the father could look right through the daughter's stomach, could identify the object and the engraving on it and what time of day it was on the clock. So that's the power of your belief that in the time we're in now, we're joining the point of dreamland, magic, your thoughts, and they're coming true all around you if you expect them when you get out of the bed that morning. Who knows what's going to happen that day? Like when the corkscrew came out of my head, I'd never heard of that before, but boom, there it was. It's a time for magic.
Fascinating. Well, that story about hypnosis was in the Michael, Talbot, The Holographic Universe, and it was a very powerful book. Michael Talbot, and he died very young, but he gave us this book which had all kinds of examples of those type of concepts like the hypnosis, and there was a religious sect that were able to throw themselves on rods and pierce all the way through their body, and they wouldn't die. So Michael Talbot, I highly recommend picking up the book. It might be out of print, but he collected all these stories like that hypnosis story, which they appear to be true. What else?
Yeah, his holographic universe book is awesome.
Yes,
Yeah, so the idea is that everything in the universe is reflected in each one of us, and yet we're in a slightly different position. So we reflect a little bit differently from each angle, and that's why if you free yourself from hierarchical thinking that some perspective is better than some others, you can appreciate every perspective. They all have their contribution, and the great hang-up on this planet has been from the snuffing of the lights that could be shined by women and by most of the people. Everybody's got their own light to shine, and what's coming down in this age of Aquarius is you can see the Lady of Fatima is a partnership society. That's part of the age of Aquarius. Partnership, I think.
I'd like to say something about what you just said, Sasha. You were talking about hierarchical thinking, and somewhere along the line I started listening really careful for hierarchical language, because what we say to each other or what we say about ourselves, the clue is for me, I'm listening for, am I a perfect representation of Source as I am, as I'm experiencing, or do I need something outside of myself to fix me? So a lot of, authoritarian religion is, I'm going to go help you find Source or God or consciousness, whereas you already are an expression of that yourself. There's something in between you and Source, and whatever's in between you and Source is got a hierarchical representation or saying, I'm the boss of you, and we need to, when we listen to how each other talk, are we looking from something outside of us that's going to come fix us, or are we going to go within and find our own way, our own path to Source and express it? It's from the inside out versus the outside in. And when you feel like, I call it the ladder game. If you're playing the ladder game, how people are climbing up this ladder to success and they're going to step on your face to get up there. Or, there's a feeling of going up and down, in value, like, wow, he's a really great person. That person's a little low life. That feeling, rather than a plane, like we're all standing on a plane together, each expressing our best way. And if you can start training your ear to hear yourself even say what's up or what's down, or is this all, where am I at from my inside place, finding my own connection to Source. This is a big deal for me because I grew up very religious, and it took a lot of years for me to work through religious programming to realize that I didn't need the priest or my husband or some authority figure to help me find my own connection to Source. I can find it myself, and I was taught differently as a religious person, and I deprogrammed myself. If I can do it, anyone can. Definitely. Thank you.
I feel like there's a lot of deconditioning that we have to do to be able to get to this point where, where we can actually like be in tune and, be in touch with this energy, because I always feel kind of like, maybe because I haven't been a practitioner of this for very long, although I've researched it and looked into it somewhat, but I feel like, as people, we have a lot of blocks, and I feel like, kind of like we have to like break through them before we can really like, get to the source of this. This is just my experience. So, but.
Yeah, that's why, seek spelled backwards phonetically is keys, and block has the word lock.
Oh, I see.
It's a Masonic kind of, they kind of mess with the English language to make it almost, but they kind of took Anunnaki stuff, like the word sin, apparently means genetically defective or genetic defect. And the way the environment, the vacuum, it's called quantum foam or radiant, the environment, it codes itself from a dodecahedral geometric shape first before it actually becomes an element. And so your DNA functions the same exact way. So when a vacuum actually codes your DNA, that's why a double helix or triple helix actually wraps around invisible. They're invisible, but they're stacked dodecahedral shapes. And a dodecahedral shape is actually, it's laddered. It's all these pentagons that are all stacked together in a circle. So that's why you have to repent to be saved. But that's also, it's a bandwidth function too. You function on a higher bandwidth electromagnetically and above and beyond that dimensionally, the more in love you are with yourself and the local environment. So A.R. Borden in Life Physics used to call it shared distributability, but it's kind of like a peer-to-peer distributed network. It's very, very similar to that, in that you have direct connection to all nodes. All nodes have connections to all their nodes equally, but you get a bandwidth increase to that information and energy the more fear that you've processed in trauma, and the more in love that you are with yourself and your local environment. And that includes all things, like all matter, local electrical systems, everything start to function in a more optimal state the more you kind of go through some of the self-work process. Mm-hmm. It's uncanny. Like car problems don't happen, and people are affected. I mentioned this before on the show, but the same way, in that people feel like there's something familiar about you, or you start to emanate this stuff off of you locally, and so people respond to that. Like people aren't as mad with you, or you get out of a speeding ticket, or your cell phone battery lasts longer. These weird little things. Weird things just kind of happen, and kind of, anyway, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but that's been my personal experience, which is just kind of encouraging.
My cell phone battery lasts longer. Get out of those speeding tickets. And I was just sharing that with you who instant messaged me, or he was on Skype, and he's over there in the war zone. And I said, you're creating it yourself, so just love those people over there. Just love it and send them. They've shown that if we do meditation and prayer in these areas, that the energy just dissipates, and they drop their weapons, and they go, why are we fighting each other? I'm getting out of here. I'm not doing this today. I choose life. I'm not going to kill somebody I don't even know.
Yeah. There was this one psychic guy, I can't remember his name, but he was having a Kundalini experience in his car while he was driving down a city street, and there was a gang fight about to happen. He drove up to it and stopped at a stop sign and just kind of stared. He was really close to him, and they just gave up, and both gangs kind of said, forget you, and all walked off. It was supposedly going to be a very violent encounter.
Cool.
Just wild stuff.
Yeah, just love. Don't play victim. You can do something about it. You can do something about everything, and that's shifting yourself. When you shift yourself, you shift And that, I think, is what AR was trying to teach us, if I'm getting what you're saying, Quantum. I'm a little bit confused, and I wish I had more information on it, and I'm trying to extract it from all these different shows, learn as we go. And I wish I would have met AR and been a part of that, so here I am now. And I think I had communication from AR one day last week or something, and I woke up and I can't remember exactly. I think it was called View Care, and I said, AR came to me last night. It was AR. I went over and I asked him, and it was definitely AR. So we only have 7 more minutes.
Well, I just want to say that one of the things that in the holographic universe, we have within us many archetypes, and it's really interesting how people are coming forth and saying, I'm Enki. No, I'm Enki. No, I'm Thoth. And several people come with the same moniker, and then this idea, the first soul can allocate is it can be in more than one body at one time, so that you can dig that just like you have more than one sub-personality within you. And then there's this thing about Supreme. David Rockefeller is saying he has incorporated within him the soul essences of all the other gods. And when you really think about it, so have we all. It's very interesting to know which ones are being activated in you and how close your angle is. If you remember that thing about all the mirrors around us, that we're sitting in the middle of a universe full of mirrors. What's our angle? It's a very, very interesting times that we live in. This is the best of times. This is the worst of times. This is the only times we've got to experience right now.
I'd like to say something about something I've learned that's kind of interesting. So we're going in that quest within to find out who we are and our connection to Source. And we're brought out to the outside, or looking to the outside, by drama and theatrics. And we were talking about, Glenn, you were talking about plays on words. This was one that I picked up, is that our hierarchical system used theatrics, pageantry, drama, media, all that. And that theatrics is theotrix, the tricks of the gods, the tricks of the hierarchy, theotrix. Mm-hmm. And that we learn that we're being dazzled by those theotrix, and we just turn our attention back to our own intention, our own question, the quest I own, and the answer, there's no answer. There's no answer, because that would be answer. I attest to this being the end of the story. No, we need another quest I own, another question, and another question, like why Socrates gave us the Socratic method to continue the quest. So when these little word plays are, I think, are very enlightening and fun, and I enjoy other people's when I hear them. It's great.
That's cool.
I think they're fun.
Yeah, that's why innocent too. Innocent. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just said. Sorry, I thought there was a delay. But yeah, that's why the word innocent. You're innocent. If you repent, which is basically kind of being in a loving state, then you're saved.
When we talk about the human capacity, I always point to the phrase by Jesus Christ, who I think is Enki, which is I never heard it in the Catholic Church in the 40 years I was in there, is when he says, "Have you forgotten? It is written, ye are gods," which means we're able to create anything that our thought comes to. We could create, which is a long way from the message that's being delivered by the Vatican. So
yeah.
In my work there, I started out by looking at John 5:45. Jesus says, "I won't judge you." I couldn't believe it. And then he turns around and says, the one who judged you was Moses. He gave you the law, but I gave you the truth. So I knew as a lawyer, well then, Moses didn't get the truth. He got the 10 Commandments, which are really just it's a cleverly disguised purgatory. It's can't do this, can't do that, can't do this. Of course you wouldn't do those things. If you're paying attention, you wouldn't be doing those things. It's not an enlightened point of view.
The number one thing is that you'll obey me and kill everybody else.
Maybe kill.
So.
Okay, we're running out of time. Anybody? We got 2 minutes. Last words from everybody. Who are you? How do we reach you?
Karen, say something.
I'll say something. You know how they listen to talk all the time. No, you can go. Well, I have a book out, and it was a channeled book and it has a lot of the concepts and things I've just been talking about. If you go to gumroad.com, GUMROAD.com / K is in kitchen, C is in cat, Patrick, you'll find my book. It's free, or you can make a donation. It's Thought Equals Matter, and it was a channeled book that I wrote. Just channeled into anatomy, and a lot of these terminologies I just said were in it. I had a lot of fun writing it. I hope you guys would check it out and have fun reading it. And thank you.
Clay, how do people reach you? You have a book right now.
No books, no websites. You can find me on Facebook, Quanta Price. But I do this just because it's really, really fun.
So do we. And Glenn, there's another book coming.
Yeah, my book 5's coming out, but you can just go online and Google The Books of Isis, ISIS, the one out of Egypt, Isis. The Books of Isis, Google that, and my 5 books will come up on diet, health issues, sacred sex, who fashioned the first Adam, and book 5 is Are We Being Lied To? And it'll be out fairly shortly, the book 5.
Now, I want to say that Glenn puts it out there about what it takes to really, really connect with a woman in a way that puts you in a